India versus West Indies. The two nations may have played 98 test matches between them and will in fact be bringing up that magical 100 test figure as far as test matches played against one another. But this rivalry is most certainly, let's say, not the Ashes, where, it's intensely competitive and you have two teams of very equal powers and prowess competing against one another. No. In test matches, both India and West Indies, well, their fortunes could not be more contrasting, whereas India have made it to the finals of both editions of the World Test Championship finals. West Indies have actually finished 8th out of the 9 teams in the WTC in both of the last 2 cycles. So as I said, it's definitely a battle between David and Goliath in this particular test series that will be coming your way very soon. However, contrary to popular belief, the West Indians do have some solid players and not entirely no-hopers or a bunch of no-hopers who are just coming together to play the format. They do have some very good players, and we thought that rather than actually go for the usual discourse and say that, this is going to be a washover or it's going to be a wipeout for the Indian team, which in all likelihood it may well be, but we thought in this video we'll look at 5 West Indies players who can actually do some damage to India if within the right circumstances and if they're able to find their best form. First up, and it's worth mentioning, Alzarri Joseph, a man who a lot of Indian fans would be very, very familiar with because of his exploits, of course, in white ball cricket as well as in the IPL. Remember, he still had that very good run with Mumbai Indians and then later on with the Gujarat Titans. Thereafter, though, he's established himself as a very, very dependable bowler in red ball cricket for the West Indies. He's very reliable in terms of he's consistent with what he does. He's the kind of bowler who look to go for the bouncer or the back of the good length deliveries more often than not. That's how he gets most of his wickets. But it's also worth noting that he's someone who off the pitch can extract that little bit of movement, and which makes it doubly dangerous because more often than not you see a bowler of his height, you're thinking he's going for the short stuff, which he does. But when he does slip that one ball slightly on a full length, and if he can get it to move, it becomes very, very tough for most batsmen to read. And therefore, he's definitely going to be one of those bowlers that you have to be watching out for in this particular series. Player number 2 is, of course, Craig Bradford, the captain. I mean, what can be said about him? If you're talking about unorthodox but successful test match players, then Bradford in many ways is definitely one of them. He doesn't have the kind of, let's say, finely tuned technique that you would associate from players who are very, very good at the test match format. But what he lacks in, let's say, technique or polish, or what he lacks in style, he more than makes up for in substance. Bradford's one good quality is that he's stubborn and he's dogged and that he can stick around for long periods. In fact, that is what has pretty much made him the linchpin of the West Indian batting lineup. He can stick around, he can actually, let's say, grind out overs, he can let others do the attacking, and then once he's spent enough time in the crease, he can more often than not end up getting, let's say, runs at a relatively quicker rate. So he's someone who gets runs and he collects runs. That's what his role is in this team. And of course, as their captain, as the leader, he's someone who, a good tactical brain. He's going to be very, very important. His form, in fact, could very well be the difference between West Indies collapsing entirely or them actually putting up a little bit of fight against an Indian team that, whilst definitely quality, is lacking a few first choice players. Player number 3 in the West Indies that we must watch out for is, of course, Kemar Roach. I mean, we talk about, there's a very old phrase, a very commonly used phrase where we say so-and-so player is aging like fine wine. Well, this man right here, Kemar Roach, is definitely the poster boy of aging like fine wine. A lot of people would remember Roach as being this ferocious bowler who could crank it up to the mid-140s, had a wicked bouncer, but could also bowl well when he was bowling full. Roach, of course, is 35 years old now, and he's lost more than a few yards of pace due to, of course, having a number of injuries, but he's not let that actually impact his style of play at all. Yes, he's lost some pace, but he's worked on and developed other strengths, and he's become one of the more quietly consistent bowlers that the West Indies has right now. And he's in fact one of those bowlers who can plug away at one end, do a good job, even get you a few wickets. And as I said, 35 years old, he's proving that he's still as good as ever, and it's pretty amazing that he's still playing test cricket at this particular level, and is not just a part of the squad, by the way. He's a sure shot first team player. He's someone whose name pretty much picks itself in the playing 11, and if India are to be successful, you'd have to think that they'd actually have to, let's say, negotiate Kemar Roach well. Because as I said, he might not always be that one bowler who will get you wickets a lot, but he still gets it. But his consistency and his ability to get that early movement, very, very important. Player number 4 in this list is, of course, Jermaine Blackwood. Now, if you're talking about the West Indian batting, it definitely is reliant on two people. One, of course, we've talked about Bradford, and now Blackwood. Now, Blackwood is someone who for years was seen as that one player who, if he was batting or if he made his debut in this era, we'd say was a typical quote-unquote baseball player. He was someone who looked to be aggressive in Test cricket, so he was, in his early days, he used to average about 40 odd, but he would be actually striking it at about 60 plus, which is very, very good. But after he got dropped due to, let's say, poor returns in terms of the number of runs he would get, despite he'd get starts but never get big runs, he kind of changed that aspect about himself, and he still scores at a big rate. But more often than not, he does end up also getting big runs. So if you're talking about Brathwaite being that one key batsman up top, in the middle order, it has to be Jermaine Blackwood, who's that key batsman for the West Indies, because he too is someone who can play both roles. Yes, he can take his time and grind it out, but he can also attack at will, and especially the longer he spends at the crease, the more dangerous he ends up becoming. Whereas Brathwaite is more of a grinder. Blackwood, once he's settled, can become very, very flamboyant, and I for one definitely would say that he's probably the one key batsman who really scares me in terms of the kind of impact that he could potentially have. Last but not least is, of course, this man right here, Jason Holder. Now, of course, Holder is one of those players who's again very well known, and I know that at times his white ball bowling can sometimes be a little bit, let's say, hit or miss, because he does tend to sometimes leak runs. In Test matches, though, he's been pretty good with the ball, and he does have a rather underrated role, or an undervalued role, you can say, within this West Indies team, in the sense that he's best to bowl with the older ball. Now, generally speaking, pacers, you're thinking, give it to them when it's new, and especially someone like Holder, he's got good height, can generate bounce, and of course can be nippy and skid it through nicely also, so someone who would be good with a new ball. But Holder operates best when the ball is older and not doing too much, because one, he'll look to consistently keep it in one particular line and length, and B, sometimes occasionally if he's lucky, he can of course get rewarded with reverse swing as well. And of course, it's also worth remembering that Holder is a more than handy bat lower down the order, will add a bit of depth to the West Indian batting team, which they'll desperately need, because again, some of the batting, there is plenty of hope being put on a lot of youngsters. Beyond, of course, Tagner and Chanderpaul, they've brought in a couple of other youngsters as well, so they'll really need the experienced ones to step up, and Holder is definitely one of them. And that's it from us. We're talking about 5 West Indian players to watch out for. Do you agree with this list, or do you have some more players that you're excited to watch come through the West Indies ranks? You can let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon as well, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and don't forget to download the AajTak app. Plus, if you're already on the channel, go ahead and check out some other videos that we've done, but for now, from my side, it's goodbye.